Lynn. She is going to be coming and sharing a short story on her own use of traditional foods as healing.
Bonjour, everyone. Megan Forshin, Indigenous Cause, Wabazation, Indodem, Mashkazi Bingajina Kadesh, Gonigan Wenji Bayan. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Megan Forsha. I'm from the Bad River Band of Ojibwe, but I was born and raised here in the Twin Cities, so I'm one of those urban Indians that we've been talking about all morning. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you guys just a little bit about my healing journey and what brought me here today. I want to start out by taking just a moment to express gratitude and to say miigwech to my former professor, mentor, and dear friend, Randy Hansen. Randy had a profound impact on my career, and I can say with absolute certainty that I would not be standing here today if it wasn't for his encouragement and his support. So for that, I'm forever grateful. The first class I ever had with Randy was called Sustainable Food Systems. And I couldn't know it at the time, but that class really would change my life. So my undergrad degree is in American Indian Studies with an emphasis on the environment and sustainability. So that's what brought me to Randy's class. And so as I was learning about Native history and learning about all the horrible things that happened to Native people and that continue to happen to Native people today, I felt the deep sense of loss and grief that often accompanies that history. And at the same time, I was learning about our current global ecological crisis and what's being done to the earth. And I saw a lot of parallels. As a young person away from home for really the first time in my life, learning about such heavy topics, to say that I felt overwhelmed, I think, would be an understatement. I would categorize it more as an all-encompassing and profound sense of despair and hopelessness. There's a new term for that, as I've recently learned. The American Psychology Association recently invented this term, eco-anxiety, to describe the deep sense of anxiety and depression and fear that people often experience when they learn about climate change and when they think about our survival as a species on this planet. Now, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any research done on this, and I'm looking to you researchers in the room, but I would bet that Indigenous youth feel this at greater rates than any other group, because it's not just eco-anxiety, it's also deeply rooted historical trauma from Indigenous cultural genocide. And so, myself, like most other Native youth that I meet, feel a deep sense of responsibility to my people and to all my relations and also to the planet. And so as I was going through school, I spent a lot of time thinking about how I could be of service to my people. And so at first, I was really focused on the environment and sustainability. And so I was like, okay, great. I'm going to study natural resources and conservation, and I'm going to learn about this land and learn about how I can be a better steward to this land and how I can protect this land. And as I started to learn even more, I started to understand the importance of tribal sovereignty to protecting our lands. So I thought, okay, great. After I do my undergrad degree in environment sustainability, then I'm going to go on to law school and I'm going to get a law degree. I'm going to study tribal sovereignty so I can learn how to protect our land and our way of life. And as I learned even more, I started to understand the importance of education, because I realized that a lack of education about our environment, a lack of education about indigenous people, indigenous cultures, and our connection with the land is a barrier to practicing tribal sovereignty, is a barrier to protecting our environment. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do my undergrad, environment sustainability, and I'm going to go into law school, get a law degree, tribal sovereignty. Then I'm going to come back to school and I'm going to get some kind of degree in education so that I can go out and I can teach people about these topics and why they're so important. Let me tell you, it did not take very long for me to realize that there was absolutely no way that I was going to be able to do all of that on my own. And I was incredibly frustrated because at a time when all I wanted was to be strong for my people, I felt spiritually, emotionally, and physically weak. I felt so weak and I was in a tremendous amount of pain. I experienced a tremendous amount of pain every single day. I was always tired. I was always hurting, aching all over. And at this time, I saw a lot of doctors, a lot of Western medicine doctors, countless doctors, countless specialists, and they all told me the same thing. They said, Megan, you're so young. You're so young and you're so seemingly healthy. We have no idea what's going on with you. There's nothing we can do except for what they eventually did do, which was prescribe me a bunch of medications like sleeping pills and muscle relaxers and anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication. I felt so weak, like I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it. Every single day was a struggle. But I felt really deeply that my life had a purpose. And so I kept pushing through because I really, more than anything, wanted to make an impact on the world and wanted to be there for my community. And so it was during this time that I was in Randy's class, Sustainable Food Systems. And at this time, I came across the Intertribal Agriculture Council, who you guys heard a lot about yesterday during the youth panel. And I came across, they were having a Great Lakes Intertribal Food Summit. And Randy encouraged me to apply. Now, I knew that I was interested in sustainable agriculture, sustainable food systems, because of the role that industrial agriculture has in our current climate crisis. So I already knew that I was excited and I was passionate about food systems, but I didn't know anything about Indian agriculture. I didn't know anything about traditional foods. At this point in my life, I still didn't understand that fry bread was not a traditional food. And so Randy encouraged me to apply. I went to the first ever Great Lakes Intertribal Regional Youth Summit. And this was one of those moments in my life where I didn't recognize at the time the significance of the impact that it was going to have on my life. Because the Intertribal Agriculture Council and this event is what introduced me to the concept of food sovereignty, which I couldn't believe that I had never heard of before. And I can't even express to you how amazing it was for me to come across this concept of food sovereignty, because food sovereignty is protecting our environment, protecting our land, and stewarding our land and our resources. And it's also cultural revitalization. It's also community health, individual health, environmental health. It's also education. So it was all the things that I had been sort of disjointedly studying and couldn't figure out how to tie all of these things together. So when I came across this concept of food sovereignty, I thought, okay, this is it. I found my place. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know that this is the thing for me. I just don't know exactly where I fit. And so Randy really encouraged me to think about my own personal food story. And I was like, okay, my food story, well, I really like to eat. End of story. He encouraged me to dig a little deeper than that. We had a couple assignments in our class. One of them was to reflect on our food choices growing up and how that has shaped the things that we were eating presently. And then also, he had us do an interview with our elders. So I interviewed my father and my father's mother. So my grandma had participated in relocation. So my dad was raised going back and forth from down here in Minneapolis and up to the Bad River Indian Reservation in northern Wisconsin. And as I heard them explain their personal relationships with food, I could see very clearly how these intergenerational changes in the food systems that we had been learning in class directly had an impact on the way that I was eating and the way that I was raised. And I realized that I have a really deep, rich, and intergenerational story around food that I hadn't considered before. So I was really excited by that. I got incredibly involved with the Intertribal Agriculture Council. I got involved with this conference. I basically made everything in my life around understanding how have intergenerational changes in our food system had an impact on our environmental health, our community and cultural health, and our individual personal health. And all the while that I was deep in these conversations around health disparities in Indian country, I was still sick. And still, at this point, I couldn't see why. It wasn't until many years later that I finally found a doctor who said, what you have is adrenal fatigue. And I had never heard this concept before, so he had to explain it to me. He said, your adrenal glands, they sit like two little caps on top of your kidneys, and they secrete stress hormones. And when we hear stress hormones, we think that's a bad thing. But actually, it's incredibly important to our functioning as humans. We need stress hormones. They're a positive thing. Unless your stress response gets so dysregulated that you're experiencing stress all the time. And so that's what was happening to me. He said, Megan, you've been experiencing chronic stress for so long. Your stress hormones are so dysregulated. You're in a constant state of stress. The first thing we need to address is your diet. And I was blown away because I had seen a lot of doctors, and I had specifically asked some of them in the past. I said, do you think this could be about what I'm eating? And they were like, maybe, probably not. And I said, can I see a nutritionist? And they said, well, we have one of those, but it's not covered by your insurance. Here's some more pills. And so finally, this doctor, what he did was he put me through an elimination diet. And so it was 21 days of pure hell, essentially. I couldn't eat anything. It was a lot of suffering. But at the end of it, slowly I added one thing after another back into my diet to see how each of these things would affect me. And oh my goodness, I was so surprised to find out that it was my diet all along. It was the very thing that I had been studying for years. I'm not going to go into the specifics of the foods that were making me sick because I'm not a nutritionist. I know there are a lot of nutritionists in the room, and I don't want to start any debates. I'm not offering anybody nutritional advice or telling you what not to eat. But I will say that the foods that were making me sick were products of our industrial food system. The foods that were making me sick were the direct result of the intentional and purposeful destruction of our indigenous foodways. So I was really blown away by this. And it was at that moment that everything really became clear to me, because I had been asking the Creator for so long, why am I experiencing this level of pain? I thought, all I want to do is to serve. I want to serve my people, and I want to serve the world. Why do I have to go through this? What is this suffering all about? And finally, everything really became clear to me, because what I realized is that I could spend all day long studying health disparities in Indian country, talking about changes in our food systems, but unless I really had the deep, embodied understanding of how colonization has impacted me personally on an individual level, then I wouldn't be able to have the effect that I really believe is my purpose in this life. And so I believe that my struggle and my journey through chronic pain and chronic stress has been my biggest blessing in life, because now I'm focused on helping people to understand and to see and to recognize how colonization, changes in our food system and in our way of life, has manifested itself physically in our bodies. And I'm dedicated to helping empower people through changes in their diet and changes in their lifestyle. Because what I realized through all that time, when I was thinking, I want to have an impact on the world, and I'm looking at our systems, and I'm thinking our education system, oh, it's broken, our healthcare system is broken, our food system is broken, and I'm thinking, there's no way I can do it alone. What I realized is that there's a lot of people out there who see the brokenness of our communities, they see the brokenness of our systems, and they really want to make a difference. There's a lot of people out there who really care deep down, and they want to make a difference, but they don't have the capacity because they're burdened every single day with pain and stress and anxiety. And so what I realized is that while I can't do it all on my own, if I can make my life about helping to empower other people and helping other people to feel better in themselves, then they can go forward and they can be the change that they want to see in the world. And that is a true ripple effect. And so while my journey through chronic pain has been a really, really long one and included a lot of suffering, there's nothing in my life that I am more grateful for, because it's brought me to where I am today. And I believe that Creator always has a plan for us. So I just want to encourage you to think about your deepest struggles, your deepest pain, and we throw this word around a lot, but trauma. It's when we look at those things and we reflect on those things that we find our own personal power and we find where our purpose is in our lives. I did great on timing. It is time for lunch. Thank you all for listening to me. Chimigwich, miyu, that's all.